Today, I will be informing you all about our nation's national debt. According to USDebtClock.org, the current national debt to the Federal Reserve is roughly $12.5 trillion, with a total U.S. debt of $55 trillion. And according to Congressman Ron Paul's book, And the Fed, we have now even become the biggest debtor in the world, owing roughly $1.5 trillion to foreign countries. We are no longer the strongest currency in the world. Because of our addiction to debt, countries like Kuwait have a stronger currency than us. Although we still are a strong government, it is very important to watch the government spending, because if we don't do so, our currency will crash. Today, we will be talking about the history of the U.S. central banking system, how money is made, and our increasing national debt. In a letter written by Thomas Jefferson to John Taylor, Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies." Throughout history, there have been three national banks. The first, in 1791, was chartered for 20 years. The second, in 1816, was also chartered for 20 years. President Andrew Jackson actually signed an executive order removing and stopping all government funds from the second central bank, as he firmly believed in not having a central banking system. The third central bank, being the Federal Reserve, which was enacted by Woodrow Wilson, is still in place today. According to the Economic Doctrine Zeitgeist Addendum, by early 20th century, the main banking families were the Rockefellers, Morgans, Wahlbergs, and Rothschilds. In 1907, there was an economic panic, known as the bankers' panic. Stocks lost roughly 50% of their value overnight. J.P. Morgan, the actual guy, is known as saving the U.S. economy, yet his reports of the Knickerbocker Trust Fund being solvent in the injection of his own money did nothing but make him one of the richest men in the world. A congressional investigation took place, headed by Senator Nathaniel Aldrich. Nathaniel Aldrich had very close ties to the banking families, eventually even marrying into the Rockefeller family. After the investigation, he recommended a central banking system be put in place in the United States government. In 1910, on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, at J.P. Morgan's own personal estate, the Federal Reserve Act was written. Not by politicians, not even by our own president, but by the main banking families in the United States. In the published document, the joint hearings before the subcommittees of the Committees in Banking and Currency, 63rd Congress, second session, the motto of the House of Rothschilds was quoted by financial writer Daniel T. Gushing. "Let us control the money of a country, and we care not who makes its laws." During the next presidential campaign, Woodrow Wilson was the leading Democratic nominee. In order to secure funds for his campaign against the Republicans, he promised the leading banking families that if elected, he would sign the Federal Reserve Act bill. As history would show, Wilson was elected president, and 2 days before Christmas, while most of Congress was on leave with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Now, what backs our dollar? Some people think gold, but this is far from true. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, and according to this executive order, it required all citizens of the United States to turn in all gold coin or bullion. If not, or they knew someone that wasn't doing this, the person would be violating the executive order and would have been punished by a $10,000 fine, which is roughly $40,000 in current money, and 10 years in prison. People did get a decent price for their gold, though, roughly $20. But the U.S. government decided to sell this gold to foreign countries at $35 an ounce. So the government took the money from the people and sold it to make a quick buck. In 1971, President Nixon actually ended all foreign countries being allowed to buy U.S. mint gold. But luckily, in 1975, Franklin D. Roosevelt's executive order was reversed, allowing people once again to hold gold. But if the government is off the gold standard, what backs our currency? Debt. Our economy is backed by debt and the promise that the members of the Federal Reserve have to keep our currency running. Yet the Federal Reserve isn't part of the U.S. government. It's as federal as the Federal Express. It is a private bank ran by private bankers, elected by private people. Money these days is printed just when needed. It is easy as you for print your essay for English classes as it is for the government to print money. How is money made, though? The Federal Reserve has what it's called like a Bible for religions. It's called Modern Money Mechanics, written and published by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. This booklet described the banking deposits of the Federal Reserve fractional reserve banking system. According to Modern Money Mechanics, when the government wants money, the U.S. Treasury gives them, say, like $10 billion in U.S. bonds. The Federal Reserve replies with $10 billion actual dollars. Now, on a side note, our economy is roughly 97% digital. So this is when the fractional reserve system takes into place. According to modern money mechanics, by the rules of expansion and deposits, 10% of that 10 billion is required as a reserve. So 1 billion is a reserve for the economy. So 9 billion is allowed to use for loans. But instead, they add that 9 billion to 10 billion to create $19 billion. This $19 billion is then loaned out to other banks and other people. The only problem with this is if all the depositors of the original money ask for that back, the banks go solvent, the banks go bankrupt. And so what do? They ask for a bailout by the federal government, like which has recently happened. This massive amount of printing and false expansion of our economy has created massive amounts of inflation. According to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, because of inflation since 1913, the purchasing power of the dollar has dropped 95%. To make sense of this, that's roughly $21 right now just to make $1 in 1913. With the massive government spending and tax cuts in the 80s till the mid-90s, the national debt began to increase rapidly. We were in the Cold War at the time, but spending more money than we did in an actual war, the Vietnam War. Clinton became president, and he created surplus with every budget and began paying off the national debt. Everything looked as if it was going to get fixed. Sadly, with President Bush's big spending in the early 2000s, the debt once again started to grow massively. In an interview with President Obama, written by David Lanhart for the New York Times Magazine, April 28, 2009, President Obama said, "I think it's important to understand that some of that wealth was illusory. What Obama is referring to is the last economic boom that became a bust. That even though everyone thought everything was so great, it was just a mirage. Yet, within the last 6 months, the national debt has increased by over $1 trillion. With the continued spending by our politicians and many connections between our political, government, and the banking families, will this ever stop? The outlook has been looking great, according to economics and economists, and more government projects are being funded by more printed money. This printed money simply takes the value from the current circulation. This increases inflation, and this increases the US dollar." Governor Ben S. Bernanke, before the National Economics Club on November 21st, 2002, said, "The U.S. government has a technology, it's called a printing press, that allows it to produce as many U.S. dollars as it wishes, at essentially no cost." Today we have discussed the history of central banking, the creation of money, and our increasing national debt. Thank you for listening to my speech, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy your new knowledge on the U.S. economy and the practices of the Federal Reserve.